I'm Nina Okafor, 27, standing backstage at New York Fashion Week watching my boss, Isabelle Durant, walk her debut collection down the runway. Every piece was mine. The asymmetrical cuts I'd perfected at Parsons, the fabric treatments I'd developed in my apartment, the signature silhouette I'd been sketching since I was 16. Anna Wintour stood to applaud, buyers rushed Isabelle with orders, and my phone buzzed with a text from her lawyer. Sign the NDA by midnight or we release the photos. Photos that didn't exist. Photos of me supposedly stealing from the company. Photos they'd fabricated using deepfake technology to destroy my career before I could prove the designs were mine. Before I tell you about the storage unit I found with 50 portfolios from designers Isabelle destroyed, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. I want to see how far this story reaches. I did not scream. I did not run onto that runway and tear the clothes off the models. I stood perfectly still in the darkness backstage, surrounded by the chaos of seamstresses and production assistants, and felt something inside me calcify into stone. The collection was called Renaissance. Isabelle had spent 6 months telling Vogue it represented her return to raw creativity after years of playing it safe. But there was nothing raw about theft. There was nothing creative about plagiarism dressed in good lighting. I watched Model 6 walk out in the finale piece, a deconstructed evening gown with hand-painted silk panels that flowed like water when she moved. I had spent 3 months perfecting that fabric treatment in my apartment, burning my fingers with dye, ruining batch after batch until the colors bled exactly the way I'd envisioned. Isabelle had watched me work on it during late nights at the atelier. She'd brought me coffee. She'd called me talented. She'd asked thoughtful questions about my process. And the whole time, she'd been taking notes. The crowd erupted into applause. Isabelle emerged from backstage in a white suit, arms raised like a prophet receiving worship. She took her bow, gracious and radiant, while cameras flashed and industry legends rose to their feet. My phone buzzed again, another text from the lawyer. This time it included an attachment, a photograph. My stomach dropped. It was me, apparently, photographed through the window of the atelier at 2 a.m., standing at a cutting table with scissors in hand and fabric spread before me. The timestamp said 3 months ago. The metadata looked legitimate. But I had never been in that room at 2 a.m. I had never worn that outfit. That wasn't my body. But it looked exactly like me, down to the small scar on my left hand, down to the necklace my mother gave me. The second photo showed me photographed leaving the building with a garment bag. The third showed me at a copy shop scanning designs. Each image was perfect, damning, impossible. The final text was simple. Sign the NDA, admit you were a paid assistant, accept $50,000 severance, or these go public tonight and you'll never work in fashion again. I looked up at the runway. Isabelle was surrounded by admirers, her hand pressed to her heart in false humility. She glanced backstage, her eyes finding mine in the darkness, and she smiled. Not a kind smile, a warning. I turned and walked out of Lincoln Center into the February cold. The city noise swallowed me immediately. Taxis honking, people shouting, the electric hum of Manhattan at night. I walked for blocks without direction, my mind racing. This wasn't improvised. This wasn't panic. Isabelle had planned this months ago. The photos, the lawyer, the timing, all of it designed to back me into a corner at the exact moment I had the least leverage. I thought about calling my parents in Lagos, but what would I say? That I'd been destroyed by a woman I'd trusted? That my entire career was over at 27? They had sacrificed everything to send me to Parsons. They believed in me when I told them I could make it in New York. I couldn't tell them I'd failed. So I sat on a bench in Bryant Park, surrounded by Fashion Week crowds celebrating, and opened my phone to the one person who might understand. Kemi, my former classmate from Parsons. She'd been brilliant, top of our class, won every award, got recruited straight into a prestigious house. Then she'd vanished. No social media, no industry presence, just gone. I'd heard rumors she'd been destroyed by her employer, but no one talked about the details. Fashion has a way of erasing its casualties. I found her number in my old contacts and typed, "Kemi, it's Nina. I need help. Isabelle Durant just did to me what I think someone did to you." I didn't expect a response, but 30 seconds later, my phone rang. "Where are you?" Kemi's voice was different than I remembered, harder, sharper. "Bryant Park." "Stay there. I'm 10 minutes away. And Nina, don't sign anything." She hung up. I sat in the cold, watching my breath form clouds, and wondered if this was how drowning felt. Slow, inevitable, surprisingly quiet. 3 years ago, I had been sitting in a Parsons critique defending my thesis collection. The professors had been brutal but fair. My work was good, technically perfect, conceptually strong, but missing something. "Where's the heart?" one professor had asked. "Where's the part of you that only you can give?" I'd spent the next year searching for that answer. I worked 3 jobs: barista in the morning, retail in the afternoon, freelance pattern making at night. I slept 4 hours and survived on coffee and ambition. That's when I met Isabelle. She came into the boutique where I worked, elegant in all black, carrying herself like fashion royalty. She bought nothing but talked to me for 20 minutes about design philosophy. When she learned I'd graduated from Parsons, she handed me her card. "I'm looking for an assistant designer," she said. "Someone hungry, someone who understands that fashion is art, not commerce. Come see me." I thought it was fate. I thought I'd been seen. Within a week, I was working at the Durant Atelier in Tribeca. The space was beautiful: exposed brick, floor-to-ceiling windows, dress forms lined up like soldiers. Isabelle's previous collections hung on the walls like museum pieces. She started me on simple tasks: sourcing fabrics, organizing samples, managing the mood boards. But she also asked about my work. She wanted to see my sketches, my techniques, my ideas. "Don't hide your talent," she'd say, watching me work. "I'm not like other designers who feel threatened by assistants. I want to nurture you. Think of this as a mentorship." So I showed her everything: every sketch I'd ever made, every technique I'd developed, every dream I dared to dream. And she absorbed it all with a smile. The work was grueling: 18-hour days, weekend fittings, last-minute changes that required pulling all-nighters. But I told myself this was the price of learning from a master. The red flags started small. An idea I'd sketched in the morning would appear, slightly modified, in Isabelle's afternoon design meeting. She'd present it as her own, and when I gently mentioned I'd done something similar, she'd smile and say, "Great minds think alike." Then came the fabric treatments. I'd developed a technique for layering organza with hand-painted silk that created an iridescent effect. I'd spent months perfecting it, burning through my savings on materials. When I finally showed Isabelle, she was effusive. "This is revolutionary, Nina. You're going to change fashion." 2 weeks later, she announced her spring collection would feature her innovative new fabric technique. My name was never mentioned. When I confronted her privately, she looked at me with something close to pity. "Nina, you work for me. Everything created in this atelier belongs to the house. That's how fashion works. Don't be naive." I should have left then, but I was 26, drowning in student loans, terrified of starting over. So I stayed. I told myself I was learning. I told myself this was normal. I had no idea I wasn't her first victim. I had no idea I was walking into a trap that had been set for dozens of designers before me. Kemi appeared out of the crowd like a ghost. She looked different: shorter hair, harder eyes, but unmistakably her. She sat beside me on the bench without greeting. "Show me the texts," she said. I handed her my phone. She scrolled through in silence, her jaw tightening with each image. When she finished, she looked at me with something between sympathy and rage. "Deepfakes," she said. "Isabelle's been using them for at least 5 years, maybe longer." "How do you know?" Kemi reached into her bag and pulled out a laptop. She opened a folder containing dozens of files. "Because she did the same thing to me, and to Julia before me, and to Rashida before Julia, and to at least 20 others I've been able to track down." The folder was labeled the Durant Files. Inside were portfolios, photographs, legal documents, and testimony from designers I'd never heard of. Each file told the same story. Young designer gets hired by Isabelle, shows her original work, watches it get stolen, tries to speak up, gets destroyed by fabricated evidence and legal threats. "Why haven't any of them gone public?" I asked. "Because Isabelle doesn't just threaten careers," Kemi said quietly. "She destroys them completely. Julia can't get a job at Target now. Rashida moved back to Mumbai and quit design entirely. Marie had a nervous breakdown and was hospitalized for 6 months. My blood ran cold. "What happened to you?" Kemi's smile was bitter. "I signed the NDA, took the money, thought I could move on, but Isabelle had also blacklisted me with every major house in New York, Paris, and Milan. She told them I was unstable, that I'd stolen from her, that I was a liability. It took me 2 years just to get a job at a bridal shop in Queens." "So why didn't you fight?" "I tried." Kemi opened another file, legal documents, emails, depositions. "I hired a lawyer. We gathered evidence. But Isabelle's legal team is vicious. They buried me in motions and counterclaims. My lawyer said we'd need $200,000 just to make it to trial. I didn't have that money." She looked at me. "But you have something I didn't have. You have all of us, every designer she's destroyed, and we've been waiting for someone with the courage to be the lead plaintiff in a class action lawsuit." I stared at the laptop screen. Names, faces, stories, a graveyard of broken careers. "I can't afford a lawyer," I whispered. "You don't need to." Kemi pulled out a business card. "Victoria Adesanya. She's a fashion law attorney who specializes in IP theft. She's been building a case against Isabelle for 3 years, waiting for the right moment." "Why would she help me for free?" "Because Isabelle destroyed her sister. And because if we win, the settlement will be massive. She'll take it on contingency." I looked at the card, then at the laptop, then at Kemi. "What do I have to do?" "Don't sign the NDA. Let Isabelle release the fake photos. And while the industry is watching her expose you, we hit her with a lawsuit that includes every designer she's ever stolen from, every piece of evidence we've tethered, and a forensic analysis proving the photos are deepfakes." "She'll destroy me." "She's already destroying you," Kemi said. "The question is whether you're going to let her do it quietly or whether you're going to make her pay for every other designer she's buried." The cold wind cut through my jacket. Around us, Fashion Week crowds laughed and celebrated, oblivious to the war being waged in the shadows of their industry. I thought about my mother, who'd taught me to sew when I was 8. I thought about the scholarship that brought me to New York. I thought about every designer in Kemi's files who'd been silenced, erased, destroyed for having the audacity to be talented. "I'm not signing," I said. Kemi smiled. "Good, because we're about to burn her entire empire to the ground." At midnight, Isabelle's lawyer released the photos. They went viral within an hour. Fashion Twitter erupted. The images looked real. Timestamp metadata, perfect lighting, my face captured in high resolution. The narrative was simple. Ambitious young assistant steals from her employer, gets caught, refuses to take responsibility. Within 2 hours, my Instagram was flooded with comments. "Thief, fraud, you're finished." Fashion journalists who'd never heard of me wrote think pieces about the ethics of young designers. Industry veterans who'd never met me declared me persona non grata. My name trended worldwide, always alongside words like scandal and theft. I sat in Kemi's apartment in Queens, watching my reputation disintegrate in real time, and felt strangely calm. Maybe because I'd already hit bottom, or maybe because I knew what was coming next. At 3 a.m., Victoria Adesanya uploaded a document to the federal court system, a 247-page lawsuit naming Isabelle Durant, her company, her investors, and her legal team as defendants. The charges included intellectual property theft, fraud, defamation, and racketeering under RICO statutes. But that wasn't the bomb. The bomb was the evidence. Victoria had hired a digital forensics team to analyze the photos Isabelle released. Their report, included in the filing, proved conclusively that every image was a deepfake. The metadata had been altered. The lighting was physically impossible. My face had been digitally mapped onto a body double. Even the scar on my hand had been added in post-production. The lawsuit also included testimony from 23 former Durant employees, all designers who'd been destroyed exactly the way Isabelle tried to destroy me. It included original sketches, dated and documented, proving that the Renaissance collection contained work stolen from at least 8 different designers over 4 years. And it included the smoking gun, emails from Isabelle to her head of production explicitly discussing how to neutralize me once the collection launched. Subject: Nina problem. Message: she's talented but naive. Same protocol as Julia. Fake the evidence, threaten legal action, offer severance. If she doesn't sign, release and bury her. We own the narrative. The lawsuit went live at 3 a.m. By 6 a.m., it was the top story on Business of Fashion. By 8 a.m., major news outlets were running it. By noon, Isabelle Durant was no longer fashion royalty. She was a pariah. The legal battle lasted 6 months. Isabelle fought viciously, hiring a team of attorneys who tried every tactic in the book. They claimed we were conspiring against her. They accused us of being jealous, talentless, vindictive. They tried to discredit our evidence, our expert witnesses, our testimony. But they couldn't explain the emails. They couldn't debunk the forensic analysis. And they couldn't silence 23 women who'd all experienced the exact same pattern of abuse. The trial itself was a spectacle. Fashion journalists packed the courtroom. Sketch artists captured every moment. The proceedings were live-streamed, watched by millions. I took the stand on day 3. Isabelle's lawyer tried to break me, accusing me of being a liar, a fraud, a bitter employee who couldn't handle criticism. But I'd been prepared. Victoria had spent weeks coaching me. When Isabelle's lawyer held up one of my original sketches and asked, "Can you prove this is yours?" I pulled out my sketchbook from when I was 16, the same design, same proportions, dated and documented. "This is the original," I said calmly. "I've been developing this silhouette for 11 years. Ms. Durant has been aware of my work for 18 months. When he showed the deepfake photos implying they proved my guilt, our digital forensics expert took the stand and methodically destroyed every pixel of Isabelle's fabricated evidence. "These images are sophisticated forgeries," he testified. "The defendant used AI technology to create false evidence of theft. This is not a case of an assistant stealing from her employer. This is a case of an employer framing an assistant to cover up her own theft." The most damning testimony came from Isabelle's former head of production, Marco, who'd quit 3 months before the lawsuit. He'd kept every email, every text, every voice memo where Isabelle explicitly discussed stealing designs and destroying designers who objected. "She called it the protocol," Marco testified, his voice shaking. "Identify young talent, extract their ideas, take credit, if they complain, neutralize them with legal threats and fabricated evidence. She'd been doing it for at least a decade." When Marco finished, even Isabelle's own lawyers looked sick. The verdict came on a Thursday afternoon. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. The judge's words echoed in the silent courtroom. Ms. Durant, you have committed systematic fraud, theft, and defamation. You have destroyed careers, stolen creative work, and used technology to fabricate evidence against innocent people. This court finds your actions not just unethical, but criminal. The financial penalties were staggering. $15 million in damages to be split among the 23 plaintiffs, an additional $30 million in punitive damages. Isabelle's company was dissolved, her assets were frozen, she was banned from operating any fashion business for 25 years. But more than the money, more than the verdict, what mattered was the exposure. The judge ordered the full case file to be made public. Every email, every stolen design, every destroyed career. Fashion schools began teaching the Durant case as a cautionary tale. Industry organizations rewrote their contracts, and designers started talking about what had always been an open secret: how many careers had been built on stolen work. I stood on the courthouse steps with Kimi and the other designers. Cameras flashing, reporters shouting questions. Victoria stood beside me, her hand on my shoulder. "How does it feel to win?" a journalist called out. I looked at the women surrounding me, Kimi, Julia, Rashida, Marie, and 19 others. Women who'd been told they were nothing, that they were crazy, that they'd never work again. "It doesn't feel like winning," I said. "It feels like surviving, and making sure no one else has to survive the same thing." The cameras clicked, the questions continued, but I was done talking. I'd said what needed to be said. 6 months after the verdict, I stood in a small gallery in Brooklyn, surrounded by people I loved. The walls were covered with designs, mine, Kimi's, Julia's, Rashida's, every piece we'd created and had stolen, every sketch we'd been told would never see daylight. We called it Reclaimed, not a fashion show, an exhibition, a memorial for stolen work and a celebration of survival. The industry came, not because they had to, but because they couldn't ignore us anymore. Editors who'd written us off as bitter came to apologize. Designers who'd stayed silent came to acknowledge their complicity. Students came to learn what their professors hadn't taught them. And somewhere in Manhattan, in a rent-controlled apartment she could barely afford, Isabelle Durant was probably watching the coverage, realizing that destroying people wasn't a business model, it was a debt that always came due. I stood in front of my centerpiece, the deconstructed gown that had started this all, the hand-painted silk panels that Isabelle had walked down the runway as her own. But now it hung under my name, with my story, with my truth. Kimi came to stand beside me. "You know what the best part is?" she said. "What?" "She made us think we were alone, that we were the problem, that no one would believe us." She gestured to the crowded gallery, but we were never alone. We were a movement waiting to happen. I looked around at the faces, designers, journalists, students, survivors, people who'd been told to stay quiet, to accept less, to be grateful for scraps. "We're not staying quiet anymore," I said. Kimi smiled. "No, we're really not." 3 years later, I sat in my own studio in Brooklyn, surrounded by fabric and sketches and the controlled chaos of creation. My debut collection, truly mine, undeniably mine, was weeks away from showing at an independent fashion week. It wasn't NYFW, it wasn't the big tents or the big names, but it was real, and it was mine. My phone buzzed, a text from one of the designers who'd been part of the lawsuit. She'd just opened her own atelier in Paris. "Look at us," the text said, "still here, still creating, still winning." I looked around my studio, at the dress forms wearing my designs, at the walls covered with inspiration, at the window looking out on a city that tried to eat me alive and failed. Isabelle had tried to teach me that fashion was about power, about who could take, who could steal, who could destroy. But she was wrong. Fashion, real fashion, is about creation, about taking fabric and thread and vision and making something that didn't exist before, about leaving a mark that's undeniably, unmistakably yours. She took my work, but she couldn't take my ability to create more. She destroyed my reputation, but she couldn't destroy my talent. She tried to erase me, but I wasn't erasable. I picked up my sketchbook, the same one I'd carried since I was 16, and started drawing. Not for a boss, not for approval, not to prove anything, just because I could. Some people think justice is about punishment, but I learned that justice is about reclamation. It's about taking back what was stolen, not just the work, but the confidence, the joy, the permission to create. Isabelle Durant is gone, but I'm still here, and I'm still designing. If you've ever had your work stolen, your ideas taken, your voice silenced, know this: they can take the credit, but they can never take the ability to create more. They can crop you out of photos, but they can't erase your talent from existence. You are not alone, you are not crazy, and you are not finished. Share your story in the comments, and if you want to see what happens when survivors stop staying quiet, subscribe. We're not done yet, we're just getting started.